Mr. Bodnar, hello. It's really nice to see you again after a few months. And there had been a lot of changes in Ukraine in terms of how the war is proceeding. We'll come to that in a minute. But Turkey had an important guest. Mrs. Zelensky was in Turkey, as with like 5 Azov commanders, right? She came here to basically help them meet with their families. I think I have the footage. Maybe you can give us some details.
Thank you very much, Nevşin, for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure to talk to you after a couple of months. Really, it was a great event because thanks to Turkey, we managed to release these guys from captivity, from Russian captivity, where they spent more than 4 months. And this weekend, we have First Lady Olena Zelenska, which came here to Turkey, met with First Lady, inaugurated a new corvette, and also was among those who organized the meeting of these commanders from Azov detachment to meet with their families. It was a very touching moment because the families didn't see them for more than half of the year, and maybe some of them were believing that they could never see them again. But it's like a miracle, and the kids were crying. The wives were very happy seeing their husbands alive, and this event happened in Ankara. It was well organized with assistance of Turkish side, with assistance of our embassy, and it was a very strong message to the society that despite of the war, the human dimension of the story remained the critical or maybe the decisive, and it gives high morale for Ukrainians to continue fighting for defense of their land and for their families as well.
Those Azov commanders in Turkey, they actually came to Turkey as a deal. At the end of the deal with about a prisoner swap, right, between Russia and Ukraine. Turkey was kind of in the middle way. For how long are they going to stay in Turkey? Do we know?
So, according to the arrangements which was reached during this exchange of prisoners, they could stay here to the end of the war. But it was agreed before, and this issue is dependent on the continuation of this process, because a lot of Ukrainian soldiers, civilians, still remain in Russian captivity, and we need to exchange them. And we believe that in this regard, the efforts of Turkish side, personal efforts of President Erdogan, and a lot of ministers who are engaged in this process will help our people to be released from these captivities, and so their suffering will be stopped, because it is very hard to listen to them. I have an opportunity to talk to them separately, and so many terrible things was discussed, was expressed by them, what they survived, what they suffered from the people who actually tortured them.
So you are working on another prisoner swap, as far as I understand. How many prisoners does Ukraine have in Russia?
I don't know the whole picture of these prisoners, but at least almost 3,000 have been surrendered during the evacuation in May from Azovstal, and majority of them still remain, because as you know, this swap we can only do for 215 which were released, and among them also some foreigners who have been fighting on our side. But majority of them still remain in captivity, and this process needs to be continued, and we were grateful to the Turkish side for the assistance in this process.
Well, Turkey supports Ukraine, and Turkey also stated that Turkey will not recognize this so-called Russian referenda, basically in the Donbas region. But on the other hand, Turkey is looking for ways to evade sanctions on Russia too. How does this affect Ukraine side?
Honestly saying, we consider Turkey as our partner and the country which is on our side, starting supporting Ukraine from the very beginning of the war, both with political and practical assistance. And these mediation efforts actually they bring results. Turkey is the only country now who managed to get the results of the negotiations with Russians. It's lead to the grain agreement, to exchange of prisoners, to organizing talks. Previously, as you know, in March and April, there were talks in Antalya and in Istanbul. Yes, there is issues related to the stolen grain, which we raise from time to time about this attempts of some companies to avoid sanctions, but it is within the dialogue between Ukraine and Turkey, and this dialogue is very open and frank. So if any questions are raised, we are carefully listened by the Turkish side, and some efforts have been done to avoid these misunderstandings. There are some differences in positions, for example, with joining sanctions. We have been asking Turkish side to join sanctions from the very beginning, but the policy of Turkey in this regard is different. We respect it, and we do not insist or not press. We understand what the policy is, and also let's be frank. Because of this policy, because the communications with Russians, we could achieve results in other directions, like this grain and exchange prisoners. Maybe some more areas would be suitable for the talks and receiving some more results in practical terms. And as I understand, this idea of bringing peace to Ukraine is crucial, and to this aim, all the efforts, let's say, are very considerably done and prepared.
Yeah, the idea behind the sanctions is just actually preventing Russia from financially resuming this war, right? Because when Russia makes money, they spend more on the war front. So the idea is to basically cut that. So when the sanctions are evading, Russia keeps making money and investing more on their front in Ukraine. Isn't it the case?
Yes. Look at the figures. So if you will analyze the statistic of the trade Turkey has with the foreign countries, so majority linked to the European Union, United States, and the other world, not to Russia. Yes, energy dependency and nuclear power plant and some other things like tourists. It is still, let's say, linked markets of Turkey and Russia, and this cooperation, as we have been explained, corresponds to the Turkish interests. So maybe Turkey understand it didn't to be continued. But from the other side, like it is with the example of Mir cards, this Russian paying cards, it's understandable that it is not possible to continue such a policy because of the possible secondary sanctions. So step by step, we will look at the opportunities how to finish the war using different methods of influence, starting from negotiations and mediation, ending to the military means and sanctions policies.
How long Europe will be able to support Ukraine, do you think? I mean, after a harsh winter, do you think they will give in to Russia?
It's we couldn't speculate, but we see how increasing interest to Ukraine is being done during recent months. Because at the beginning, nobody believes that they will survive. Then, first maybe half of war, let's say 3 months, we have been doing this war only on our own. Then the West and the countries around us understood that it's much more better to support Ukraine to withstand this Russian aggression than to witness it by themselves. Because if Russians will invade Poland or Lithuania, for example, then the whole NATO should spend more efforts and fight against Russia. Now it's much more easy because Ukrainians are fighting, and we have enough of motivation and will to push them back out of our country to the borders of 1991. That's the story. Yes, and it is reachable. So now they are losing ground. Yes, they are mobilizing. They are creating different attempts, but what they have been doing is all linked only to the impossibility of resuming negotiations, because all these things they are linked to the creating narratives in international arena, which show Russia as the partner with whom you couldn't discuss anything, because they're only insisting on their ultimatums, which sounds crazy and looks very unreasonable. From the other point of view, Ukraine presents as a strong country which could defend itself, which could continue the war, and so sooner we beat them back, there will be no need to supply us with weapons. Maybe we will need to supply us with the equipment for reconstruction, which is maybe more peaceful and more profitable, let's say correctly. That is also the case for the international community.
How about the nuclear threat? What if Russia uses this tactical nuclear weapon? Then what's going to happen?
Let me ask the opposite question. What it will change? So the destruction of cities in the front area is such that at least they look like the nuclear weapons was used, like tactical nuclear weapons. Because if you will look at the characteristics of tactical nuclear weapons, it's like to blow it up and destroy Mariupol, for example, but it's already destroyed. So they could kill more couple of thousands, but they will not receive changes in the war. It doesn't scare us. So whatever they will decide, it will not reflect to the frontline situation. They could only kill us, but it doesn't bring the or decrease the determination of Ukrainians to liberate their territories. And response should be very strong from the international community, particularly for those who have these nuclear weapons. Because as you remember, in the 90s, we have given up our nuclear weapons, which we have, and it was the third nuclear potential of the world. We give it up in exchange of the so-called guarantees or assurances given by the States, Britain, Russia, then China joined, and France. They are nuclear powers, and they have responsibility to do everything possible, first of all, to prevent Russia from using it, or to respond if they will use it. Because we do not have nuclear weapons to respond it directly, I mean, in this dimension. And that is also the issue for the whole region. Because using nuclear weapons or using nuclear chantage, as it's being done with the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, it's the threat for the whole region, not only for Ukraine or for energy security. It's this situation creates a very dangerous dimension, which could actually threaten dozens of countries. And it's also we need to think about it correctly, jointly.
Mm-hmm. Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is under the auspices of Russia officially right now. But are you aware of its safety?
You know, they could declare everything. They could, they could declare that moon is theirs or Washington D.C. belongs to Russia, but it's changed nothing. Physically, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is under their control. I mean, military personnel is there, but this station is interlinked with the Ukrainian electricity system, and they couldn't change it. Physically, to change everything, you need to invest a lot of money to change the flow of electricity and to try to put its management, to change all the people who are there, so etc. So it's a long process. By the decree, it couldn't be done. Secondly, we have a MAGATA delegation. We had a MAGATA delegation visiting this station, and there was a recommendations to create a let's say a zone free of weapons and military equipment, but they didn't apply to it. So it's still creating dangerousness to the whole region, and particularly to those who are living there, and also to the Russian forces. If anything happened there, so they will suffer first. So still, it is like in deadlock with this power plant. But what we need to liberate these territories and take it back. That's
how big is the risk? Like, kind of meltdown can happen in Zaporizhia because it's in the middle of a war. I mean, this nuclear.
Yes, before the war, we have been using this argument to our international partners that to have a war in the country which have 5 nuclear power plants, it's madness, because everybody will suffer from that, and it doesn't stop Russians. And even if you might remember a situation which took place at the beginning of war, and then a couple of months later, they have been specifically shelling this area around, threatening to revolt, that we will blow it up in case you will not, let's say, take our demands. So no one reacted to this chantage, and now what we see, it's still continuation of the story, but with no results. So physically, they could create the situation of pollution, and the pollution could be not only of Ukrainian territory but also of surrounding countries. But to organize a nuclear blow up, it is impossible, because the reactor is not working in such a manner that it will blow up like bomb. It could also only create dirty pollutions, which is actually dangerous, like Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But that's a different story, and I believe that they will not do the crazy thing which could suffer them, the Russians could suffer by themselves.
I see. Mr. Zelensky said there'll be no negotiations with Mr. Putin, no matter what. He is likely to, have a negotiation with a latter leader of Russia, like whoever comes after Putin. How likely is that, do you think? And what if somebody even more nationalistic, somebody with more imperialistic dreams comes to power after Putin? I mean, I understand that's possible also.
The logic of our president is very simple, that we announced this decision before the so-called referenda and the decisions which Russians try to present as the fact accompli, that we will not talk to them in case they will organize this theater of referendums and trying to join these territories or annex this territory. So we implemented then it into the law, which means that obligation of Ukrainian government not to talk to Putin, and we will talk only to the government which will be reliable and agreeable, so that we could reach an agreement. What to talk with Putin? We have talked with him for 8 years after 2014, and no results were received. We received only a war. It means that either we will have a long-term military contradiction, even in case we will liberate the territories, or the government in Russia should be changed, then we could talk with them. And this also created an opportunity for us not to be under the pressure of any countries outside, to press on us, negotiate with Russians because of, let's say, we need a peace and we could neglect your interests. So first, liberation of territories, or Russia leaving territories, which they occupied in recent 8 years, and then we could organize some talks, but not with Putin, maybe with some other guys. That's also an opportunity. And whoever it will be, nationalists, chauvinists, or liberals, they are all Russians, and they present this imperial idea. That's all the story which we should talk about also. And we start this work about the responsibility, because it's not only about the peace treaty, but it's also about punishment of the evil, which create a number of tragedies in this century, starting from Georgia, Syria, Libya, Nagorno-Karabakh as well. They also have their hands there. So it's all Russian created conflicts, and they have very strong influence on these territories and creating very dangerous conditions there. So we should punish them as well.
Yeah, but not all Russian citizens are complying with this state policy. I mean, we're seeing here and there these protests, and it's not easy to protest such an authoritarian government. And also there are some other politicians like Navalny, for example. Do you think if he was in power, does he have also this imperialistic perspective about the world?
Yes. He already announced in a number of cases that, for example, Crimea belongs to Russia, that we should continue not the war, but let's say the policy of being strong power in the world, etc. It means, in our transcription, it means that it will continue to suppress neighboring countries with different means. Because if you could recall, so I have an experience, personal one. I was in Moscow when Putin became president, and I remember how they started to the policy of turning back territories. So they started from the very kind attitude, like creating Year of Ukraine in Russia, cultural events, songs, different other things. But the aim was to turn back control over Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Georgia, etc. So it was a hidden policy of Soviet Union 2.0 with attempt to turn it back under Russian control. I don't believe that Navalny or other guys will change the attitude of Russia if Russia will not be, let's say, I will call it de-imperialized. I mean, like the Nazification period take place in Germany after the World War II. It should be the same with the, let's say, to decrease propaganda and to create more free conditions for the Russian society and for the national republics which exist in Russia, because Russia is the federation and hundreds of nationalities living there. Chechenians, Tatarians, different others, and they are all suppressed. Their languages are forbidden practically. They have no opportunities to develop their own identity, etc. And it is still the empire which has continued to do this policy also outside their borders, which they exist now. So that is a long story, unfortunately, and we are also prepared for long resistance to these attempts, or imperial attempts. And also we try to convince our partners that it is not easy to get agreement with neither Putin nor other guys who will be at the same conditions which now exist in Russia. And
so you think in Russia, Ukraine has zero friends, like not even, I don't know, a couple of regular Russian citizens?
No, regular Russian citizens could easily turn off this propaganda tool, which they have in their TV, and could switch to normality with understanding that they are not correct. And these people, the same people, could be one of them could be in Antalya, for example, and say that we are against the war. They turned back to Moscow and they became the Putin lovers. So it depends on where they are. But the majority of society, according to the official data, they are supporting this war, and they have been supportive before the mobilization. I don't know how it now reflects to the existing situation, but before the war, it doesn't touch them. I mean, this rhetoric. When the war started, they have been in favor because they believe that Russians will win quickly. Now, when it touched almost half of Russia or majority of families, most probably it would have influence. But will it be quicker or sooner? That's the, let's say, the rhetorical question. Could be so. It's not about having friends or not friends, because according to even official data, we have 2.8 million Ukrainians living in Russia, originally Ukrainians. But are they supportive for Ukraine? I guess no. Now they are calm and not trying to protest or do something else with that. So I mean, it is still the obvious question that this repressive mechanism does not allow any free speeches to appear, and let's say to see that friends are friends, only except maybe some of the public persons who already announced their disagreements with Putin's aggressive policy.
One last question. I know it's hard to foresee, but what do you foresee? When do you think this war will be over?
I couldn't foresee that it will be over soon. So military activities could be over approximately in a year if we will be successful in liberating our territories. But will it be over? I mean, in general terms, I don't think so, because still, if you look at the map of our borders with Russia, we have more than 2.5 or 2.5 thousand kilometers of so-called front line, because Belarus is de facto in war, and airplanes, missiles, and Russian troops could easily penetrate our border and attack any cities. Russian border is also very long, and it is still unstable, and they are attacking even the territories which are not under the occupation. So still it might be this situation up until the agreement which could be signed with maybe new Russia. We believe that it should be a new Russia, at least not from with the Putin regime, or with the Putin on the head of this regime.
Thank you, Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nevşin Hanım. So very glad to hear you and to speak to you.